NATO's chief has warned that the military alliance will defend every inch of its territory should Russia attack a member country, as he condemned Moscow for launching its brutal act of war on Ukraine. Speaking after chairing an emergency meeting of NATO envoys, Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said the 30-nation security alliance will continue to beef up its defenses on its eastern flank near Ukraine and Russia. He said U.S. President Joe Biden and his NATO counterparts will hold an online summit on Friday. Russia has attacked Ukraine. This is a brutal act of war. Our thoughts are with the brave people of Ukraine, Mr. Stoltenberg told reporters. Peace in our continent has been shattered. We now have war in Europe, on a scale and of a type we thought belonged to history. NATO is the strongest alliance in history, and make no mistake, we will defend every ally against any attack on every inch of NATO territory, he said at the organization's Brussels headquarters. An attack on one ally will trigger a response from the whole alliance. During the meeting, Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania and Slovakia triggered urgent consultations under Article 4 of NATO's founding Washington Treaty. These are launched when the territorial integrity, political independence or security of any of the NATO parties is threatened. Mr. Stoltenberg said NATO has decided to activate emergency planning to allow commanders to move forces more quickly. He spoke shortly after envoys to the Transatlantic Alliance agreed to further beef up its land, sea and air forces on its eastern flank near Ukraine and Russia. We have decided, in line with our defensive planning to protect all allies, to take additional steps to further strengthen deterrence and defense across the alliance, the ambassador said in a statement. Our measures are, and remain, preventive, proportionate and non-escalatory. Lithuania declared a state of emergency in a decree signed by President Gitanas Nausėda in response to Russia's attack. The Baltic countries' parliament is expected to approve the measure in an extraordinary session on Thursday. The measure, in effect until 10 March, allows for a more flexible use of state reserve funds and increased border protection, giving border guards greater authority to stop and search individuals and vehicles in border areas. NATO member Lithuania borders Russia's Kaliningrad region to the southwest, Belarus to the east, Latvia to the north and Poland to the south. While some of NATO's 30-member countries are supplying arms, ammunition and other equipment to Ukraine, NATO as an organization is not. It will not launch any military action in support of Ukraine, which is a close partner but has no prospect of joining. Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, however, said in a joint statement, "We would need to urgently provide Ukrainian people with weapons, ammunition and any other kind of military support to defend itself as well as economic, financial and political assistance and support, humanitarian aid." The most effective response to Russia's aggression is unity, Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas tweeted. Russia's widespread aggression is a threat to the entire world and to all NATO countries. NATO began bolstering its defenses in northeastern Europe after Russia annexed Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula in 2014. It has about 5,000 troops and equipment stationed there, but those forces have been beefed up with troops and equipment from several countries in recent months. A first step now could be to activate the NATO Response Force, NRF, which can number up to 40,000 troops. A quickly deployable land brigade that is part of the NRF, made up of around 5,000 troops and run by France alongside Germany, Poland, Portugal and Spain, is already on heightened alert. Some NATO members have also sent troops, aircraft and warships to the Black Sea region, near allies Bulgaria, Romania and Turkey. The UK's Ministry of Defence has announced a host of new British deployments in recent weeks. The Pentagon has also put up to 8,500 US troops on heightened alert, so they will be prepared to deploy if needed to reassure other allies. According to NATO, there were no NATO forces in the eastern part of the alliance before 2014. Russia's annexation of Crimea in March 2014 was a wake-up call for the alliance. At its summit in September that year, NATO said, Russia's aggressive actions against Ukraine have fundamentally challenged our vision of a Europe whole, free and at peace. The alliance agreed what the Secretary-General described as the most significant strengthening of its collective defense in decades. The Readiness Action Plan. In 2014, NATO adopted the Readiness Action Plan, a package of measures designed to assure allies, improve the responsiveness and effectiveness of its forces, and deter threats. More measures were agreed at subsequent ministerial meetings and summits, most notably in Warsaw in 2016. Some of the most visible measures have been the deployment of 4 multinational battle groups in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania and Poland. A significantly enlarged response force of 40,000 troops. A new 5,000-strong Very High Readiness Force to deploy at short notice. Expanded air policing above the Baltic states and in the southeast. Increased naval presence in the Black Sea. New commands to maintain lines of communication across the Atlantic Ocean and facilitate the movement of troops and equipment across Europe. New small units in 8 countries bordering Russia, Ukraine and the Black Sea to facilitate the deployment of the new Very High Readiness Force. In the Baltic states, new battle groups and enhanced air policing. In the immediate aftermath of the military incursion into Ukraine in 2014, NATO boosted its air defense and air surveillance capabilities. The Baltic Air Policing Mission was expanded, with a second base in Estonia, Amari Air Base, added to the original base in Lithuania, Šiauliai Air Base. RAF Typhoon aircraft have participated in the Baltic Air Policing Mission 5 times since 2014, 3 times in Estonia, 2015, 2016 and 2019, and twice in Lithuania, 2014 and 2020. The UK is leading one of the 3 battle groups established in the Baltic states since 2017. As of March 2021, there were approximately 4,000 troops across all 3 battle groups. The UK-led contingent in Estonia is currently based around the Royal Tank Regiment. NATO battle groups (PDF) include main battle tanks, armoured fighting vehicles, self-propelled artillery and air defence assets, bomb disposal engineers and intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance specialists, among other capabilities. Poland. The U.S. leads a 4th multinational battle group in Poland. In March 2021 this numbered around 1,000 troops, PDF, including a light cavalry squadron from the Royal Dragoon Guards. Romania. NATO has reinforced air policing in Romania, covering NATO's southeastern flank along the Black Sea. The UK contributed 4 Typhoon aircraft to Romania for NATO's Southern Air Policing Mission in 2017 and 2021. In March 2014, NATO began flying air surveillance missions over Poland and Romania to monitor the Ukraine crisis. An expanded response force. Since 2014 NATO has significantly enhanced its existing response force, increasing total troop numbers from 13,000 to 40,000. Air, land, maritime, special forces, and logistics troops from across the alliance have been placed on a high level of readiness and are available to support the response force in 2022 if required. NATO will not disclose the exact composition or locations of these forces for reasons of operational security. NATO has also created a smaller Very High Readiness Force of 5,000 troops as part of the response force. France is leading the force in 2022, which will be built around the Franco-German Brigade, a binational unit, of 3,500 troops, with additional forces from Spain, Portugal and Poland. In January 2022, the U.S. announced 8,500 U.S.-based military personnel have been placed at readiness to provide forces if NATO should activate the NRF, NATO response force, or if other situations develop. These forces remain in the United States. The response force has never been activated in its entirety since it was established in 2003. However, elements have been activated in response to natural disasters and most recently, to assist with the evacuation of Afghans from Afghanistan in August 2021. Further deployments in response to the Ukraine crisis 2022. Following the meeting of the NATO-Russia Council on 12 January 2022, the NATO Secretary-General said that in the event of any Russian use of force against Ukraine, the alliance would have to seriously look into the need to further increase our presence in the eastern part of the alliance. Initial moves to reinforce Allied deterrence were announced on 24 January 2022. Several NATO nations, including Spain, Denmark, and the Netherlands, will deploy additional fighter aircraft and naval assets to Eastern Europe and the Baltic Sea as part of NATO's enhanced forward presence in the region. France has indicated its readiness to send troops to Romania under NATO command, and the Netherlands is putting forces on standby for NATO's response force. On 30 January, Downing Street said the UK is considering bolstering its offer to NATO with a major military deployment. The press release said the UK is considering options to double troop numbers and send defensive weapons to Estonia. During a visit to NATO on 10 February, the Prime Minister said the UK will double its presence in Estonia and is sending RAF Typhoon fighters and Royal Navy warships to Cyprus and the Mediterranean. The MOD is sending Royal Marines and Royal Engineers to Poland on a bilateral basis. On 2 February, the U.S. announced plans to send an additional 3,000 troops to Romania, Poland and Germany to reinforce the deterrent and defensive posture on NATO's eastern flank. The U.S. has separately put 8,500 troops, based in the U.S., at readiness to provide forces if NATO should activate the NRF, NATO response force, or if other situations develop. On 7 February 2022, NATO's Secretary-General said the alliance is considering more longer-term adjustments to our posture, our presence in the eastern part of the alliance. No final decision has been made on that. Meeting in Brussels on 16 February, NATO defense ministers agreed to consider establishing new NATO battlegroups in Central and Eastern, Southeastern Europe. France has offered to lead a battlegroup in Romania. The 24th of February 2022 onwards. On the 24th of February 2022, Russia launched a major military assault on Ukraine. The North Atlantic Council met on the same day, with an emergency virtual summit of heads of state and government held on the 25th of February 2022. NATO leaders have ruled out deploying any forces in Ukraine, but is making significant additional defensive deployments of forces to the eastern part of the alliance. The Secretary-General announced that elements of the NATO response force will be deployed for the first time in a collective defense context, although he made clear that NATO is not deploying the whole of the response force. The Russian perspective. NATO is breaking its promises. Russia has long blamed NATO for breaking perceived promises Moscow believes NATO made after German reunification in the 1990s to not expand further. In late 2014, Russia cited the buildup of military infrastructure near the borders of the Russian Federation as one of the reasons for identifying NATO as an external risk to Russia.